Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, and JK Dobbins will each be searching for a new home in free agency. We discuss best fits for the top free agent running backs on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer, and I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today, we are going to go through the top free agent running backs that are all going to be looking for a new contract next week, whether that be with the team they're already with or trying to find a new home and a new backfield that they can hopefully lead in next year for the 2025 season and help us out for fantasy. Now, the group of guys, there's a lot of question marks around pretty much all of them, right? And it starts right at the top with Najee Harris, who has to be the biggest name available. And the overall production is there. Like, he's had over 1,200 scrimmage yards every season in his career. He gets a ton of work. Just the efficiency has not been there, which has led to not too many fantasy points since his rookie season was great. Since then, it's been very mediocre at best. So what are your thoughts on Najee Harris? I definitely don't think, coming back to Pittsburgh's the best fit for him. It hasn't worked out. But is there a backfield that you think he can mesh well with, or a coach where he could actually be productive for fantasy?
Yeah, I think maybe he was extended into a role that he wasn't all too comfortable with. That's why they ended up with Jalen Warren, and he ended up being a dynamic guy that they can put in to play off Harris's power running. So he just wasn't a feature back in the first round, not like Josh Jacobs, his former Alabama teammate, who ended up being that for the Raiders. And the Packers in last year's free agency class doesn't even compare to this. You had Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Jacobs, Joe Mixon, Tony Pollard, even Austin Eckler had some really good value. So that class was loaded. This is not. And if you start with Harrison and Aaron Jones, they're more complementary backs at this stage of their career. I know Harris is much younger. Jones is right there at 30. But for Harris, I think it has to be kind of a power situation. I see one situation that kind of lines up with this. That would be the Bears. They just upgraded their offensive line with Jonah Jackson and Joe Thuney. You figure both of them will start on the interior as they find a new center as well. So their run blocking is already much better. And you get DeAndre Swift in there. What is he meant to do? Catch passes, get an open field. Anytime they've tried, whether it's Philadelphia or Chicago, force this guy into a bigger role, it doesn't work. He has to go to his role in Detroit, where he's the receiving back. And that will take a lot of pressure off Caleb Williams if he kind of knows what they're going to do when guys in the game. That said, Harris is not a zero in the passing game. I mean, that was one of his assets early that helped pad his stats as a rookie. So he can go back to that. It's not going to be, however, Saquon Barkley, right? He had his rookie season, then he signed free agency, had his best season. We're not going to see a carbon copy of that with Harris. No way. But complimentary back that can be helpful. Maybe he's the new Dave Montgomery, ironically, going from the other side here, the Bears getting him, and you have both of these guys, him and DeAndre Swift, in the Ben Johnson offense with a better offensive line. So I think that's the best fit. And hopefully he can get in a position where he can score some touchdowns, pad his fantasy value. So that's where I'm looking at right now. But I think he's best suited in a committee with another guy that's going to catch passes.
So I'm hoping he can find a full lead job. I do think he's good enough to take a huge workload, right? Like, his body is held up fantastically too. He has not missed a game in his NFL career. He's the only running back that has played every game since 2021, and he's getting a ton of touches on his body too, but his body is holding up. I would like to see him on a team that has more scoring opportunities, right? Because that's a big problem with his fantasy production, is that he just doesn't consistently get the chances to score because he's been stuck in the Steelers offense that, their offense doesn't score all too often or get, near the goal line. A lot of times when they do score, it's a big long pass play to George Pickens or something like that, right? So it wasn't enough consistent work around the goal line. If he can go to a team like the Chargers, I think that could be really interesting for them. If the Chargers don't end up bringing back JK Dobbins, who we'll talk about later, I do think that could be a really nice fit. We know Jim Harbaugh wants to run the ball a lot, play good defense, and then they have a great quarterback and hopefully, get some more weapons for Justin Herbert. But I do think the Chargers could be a really nice fit for him. But I did also have the Bears down here Now, we don't know if the Bears will technically be scoring more points. We're assuming they will be with Ben Johnson and second-year Caleb Williams. But that could also be an interesting landing spot for Najee Harris for sure. Now, Aaron Jones, you mentioned, is 30 years old, and he'll turn 31 during the season in December. So definitely hitting that age where it starts to get very, very scary for running backs. It used to be 28. Now I think we're able to push it back a year or two, but now definitely 30 it starts to get a little scary there when you're trusting him. But he had a great season last year in terms of yardage, 1,545 scrimmage yards. He had career high 255 carries and 1,138 rushing yards. So like his body was still holding up last year. He still looked good. Still average a pretty respectable 4.5 yards per carry. The only thing that limited him last year was that he only scored 5 rushing touchdowns, right? So if he could score more touchdowns, he would have been a huge hit last year. He was still running back 20 in fantasy points per game at his age. Not getting a ton of work, but again, a career high 255 carries. He did get targets. I do think he still has juice left. And one fit I was looking at him for is the Broncos with Sean Payton. I think that could be a really nice fit.
Yeah, I do like that because he can catch passes and he does play well off of passing and that kind of spreads it out. So he's got a little bit of Alvin Kamara. They're kind of draft kind of classmates there. So similar type guys that can get in the open field and make things happen. So that would make sense to land with a Sean Payton offense after he employed Kamara. Another team that we can look at is the Chiefs, right? This is when they usually succeed, have this type of back that's versatile, that can catch passes, much like the Damian Williams, right? Think about Damian Williams has been the most effective Chiefs running back in crunch time here for Patrick Mahomes, and because he could catch passes, do a lot of things. We've also seen flash of that with Jerick McKinnon. Those type of backs are what the Chiefs kind of need. So if they see Aaron Jones at that role, that's fine. I don't know if that's the best for Jones and his volume, because again, he might be limited to a little bit of role player, but I can see the Broncos or another team that's been rumored where his one time Viking was there, Alexander Madison, the Raiders. He could be a fit there as well. The Raiders desperately need somebody. Maybe they bring in a rookie back and pair with Jones. The reason why Jones had so much work is they didn't really have anyone else. They had to go make a deal for Cam Akers. It was a pretty shaky backfield all around. So Jones had all the opportunities because they really didn't have anyone else. So if he goes somewhere else, I would expect there's going to be a little more competition for touches. So look, I think that's about his peak, an RB2 somewhere in there. He could be really solid depending on what team he ends up on, but I don't see him suddenly shooting back up into the top 12 as an RB1. I think those days are over and behind him in Green Bay.
Yeah, definitely. He's not going to be a top 12 running back. I don't think anyone would assume that, but I do think he'll probably keep going late in drafts because his age, because he doesn't give you those winning weeks anymore, right? But he could be a very solid RB2, late RB2 flex type play for those if he gets into a good landing spot. So we'll see where he goes. But again, even at 30, 31, which he will be in the season, I still think he has a little bit juice left, at least for the 2025 season. We're going to get into more free agent running backs, including these might be the top 2 guys, JK Dobbins and Rico Dowdle. We're talking about Najee Harris and Aaron Jones, but JK Dobbins and Rico Dowdle, I'm sure, will have a pretty solid market out there as well. We'll get to them right after a quick break. If you have pets like I do, you've probably heard of Chewy. They really do have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. Whether you're shopping for food, treats, or even pet healthcare, Chewy makes it fast, easy, and affordable. With over 100,000 products from all your favorite brands, Chewy has everything your pet needs, from food and treats to toys, beds, and grooming. It's not just for dogs and cats. They've got supplies for birds, fish, reptiles, and small pets too. Chewy also makes it easy to manage your pet's health with prescriptions, telehealth, vet visits, and even in-person vet clinics rolling out nationwide. AutoShip is a game changer. You can set up your automatic deliveries for food, treats, or any essentials so you never run out. You can easily change or cancel at any time. I personally utilize Chewy all the time. I have 3 dogs, 2 cats. It's a zoo over here, but I have their food on AutoShip. It's super easy. I have my dog's favorite toys on AutoShip, so they never run out once they destroy them. It's really been a game changer, like they said. It does just make everything so much easier. So if you want to try it out, Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. You can save $20 on your first offer and get free shipping by going to chewy.com or clicking the link in the description. Save $20 on your first order with free shipping by clicking the link in the description. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details. All right, let's continue talking about the free agent running backs and their best landing spot that would be a great fit for them. JK Dobbins, do you think he could be the most sought after running back in this free agency class? And I think if he didn't have the injury history, he definitely would be, right? So do you think that the Chargers will try hard to keep him, or will they, kind of get beat out with a team willing to pay up for him? Because he showed that when he's healthy, he's still a very good running back.
Yeah, I mean, you could see him fit with the Broncos, right? He gives them a little bit of versatility. They're looking for someone to replace Javonte Williams. There's a bit of a kind of a carousel going on here with these running backs, because you mentioned a lot Najee Harris being a fit for the potential Bears situation or the Chargers. Well, J.K. Dobbins could maybe trade places here with Harris and end up in Pittsburgh. So there's all kinds of things that are at play here. Look, these backs are a bit interchangeable in terms of their role. I think you'd like Dobbins to do a little bit more in the passing game. You'd like him to stay fully healthy. He had a couple games he missed last year despite coming back well. I mean, he's right there in the running for comeback player of the year. He had major knee injuries before then. So it was a miracle that he was on the field and even producing when he was doing those big runs and finding the end zone for the Chargers. So I think he has plenty of juice left. He's always a big play runner. We'll see where he can get. I mean, we look at the Raiders as well. That's a situation that we have to keep thinking about, right? The Raiders have a current connection to Ohio State there with those running backs, Quinshon Judkins, Trayvon Henderson. Maybe they do a double Buckeyes backfield and get a veteran here and combine him. So there's all kinds of teams in play here for Dobbins. Again, the Raiders and Broncos and Browns, to me, they represent just volume-based plays where they're going to offset some of the talent maybe concerns, right? That they might just have to touch the ball a lot. Well, then you get a team like the Steelers and Bears, it's a little bit cloudier with the usage because you do have another back there that can cut into it. So I think Dobbins is special. I just don't think you can overwork this guy still. I don't think he's meant to have 20 to 25 touches in a game. If you can get him in a complementary approach a little bit more than he was with the Chargers when Gus Edwards got hurt, I think he'll be okay to produce well in fantasy.
Yeah, I have down the best fit for him would be the Steelers. I think, especially if Justin Fields is going to be the quarterback, I think that would help him out a bunch, right? And that could be a really good running duo back there with Fields and J.K. Dobbins. And then, he doesn't get a ton of receiving work. That's not really his skill set. But if they have Jaylen Warren as a restricted free agent, so if they bring him back, Jaylen Warren and him would actually be a nice running back duo back there too, because Warren could be the change of pace, pass catching back, also, allow Dobbins not to have to put 20 carries a game on his body, right? I do think that could be a really good spot for him. He's been the opposite of Najee Harris in efficiency, right? I mean, he's averaged 5.2 yards per carry in his career. That's the second most among running backs since 2020, behind only Jahmyr Gibbs. So definitely, I mean, he has the juice, as long as a team will trust that he can stay healthy, because obviously 2 major injuries over the last 4 years. So that's always the biggest concern with him. But if he showed us last year, if he can stay healthy, he could still be a very good fantasy running back. He was running back 17 in fantasy points per game this last year. And that's with not getting a ton of work, right? Like, he was still the lead back for the Chargers, but split it with Gus Edwards when Edwards was out there. So another guy, though, Rico Dowdle, he's 26 years old, will turn 27 in June. He finally got his chance to show what he can do as a lead back, right? It took forever. It took till 2024 and still, middle of 2024 before the Cowboys finally gave up on Ezekiel Elliott and went to Rico Dowdle. I do think he looked solid, right? It's not like he shocked you out there or was killing it, but he did have 100 rushing yards in 4 of his last 6 games played. He had 0 games with 100 rushing yards in his career prior to that. I do think if he was given a big role, he could be a solid producer. I just don't know what team would do that at this moment, because I do think this is a good running back draft class as well. So I do envision it it's a hard thing to envision him finding like a lead role somewhere.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, I think he's a very good backup, and we've mentioned maybe if the Browns can pair him with a young back, that would be a good fit. Another team that could be sneaky is the Saints, only because he's had some history with Kellen Moore, and he could be a good backup there over what they've had with Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller that have just not panned out right. They've not been healthy, but you could have like a seamless backup to Alvin Kamara if you have that situation. So what I like about Dowdle, look, I think he'll end up in a place where he's going to be a very clear handcuff. I wouldn't go that far above and try to target him. I don't think he's going to be in position to get a starting role. I think it was by default last year. I think the Cowboys admittedly made a mistake trying to just ignore their backfield. Dowdle should be a backup. They forced Elliott in there thinking he had something left in the tank. So I think they correct that mistake. And if Dowdle goes back to Dallas, I think is a valuable handcuff role, hopefully to Ashton Genty.
This is my worry, is that the Cowboys will just re-sign him, but also draft a running back early, one of these top guys. Yeah. And because Rico Dowdle's been there with the team and because he got workload and was productive last year, they'll give him too many touches for our liking for when it comes to the rookie running backs fantasy potential, right? So I do kind of just want him out of Dallas just to give us that elite running back option in Dallas for whoever they draft. I brought this up on, I think, yesterday's show or the day before that. I would really like to see Rico Dowdle with the Chiefs. I mean, we know the Chiefs, they don't typically spend up on running backs, right? So this could be a really nice, cheaper option for them in free agency to kind of battle it out with Isaiah Pacheco or maybe split the backfield with him next year. But I do think Rico Dowdle in that offense would be better than Pacheco, offer a little bit more burst and all of that. So I do think maybe that's the best landing spot for him, but it's hard, like I said, to envision him getting a lead role and being too, important of a fantasy asset next year. Probably don't see that unless you said he's like a handcuff. And if there's an injury, then he could step into a role. There are some aging running backs that we have to get to, and Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Did you know Kareem Hunt is older than Nick Chubb? I did not know this. Javonte Williams, still young, but has not been good. And then will A.J. Dillon find a starting job? I feel like he's been the forgotten man after sitting out for a year. We will discuss after our break. All right, Nick Chubb getting into more running backs that will be trying to find a new home come next week. And it does sound like the Browns probably won't be bringing back Nick Chubb, who's 29 years old. We know the devastating knee injury he had in the 2023 season. And that really, it messed up 2024 for him pretty much the whole year, right? Like missed a chunk to start the year and then just did not look the same whatsoever. Averaged 3.3 yards per carry after averaging 5.3 in his career prior to that. Like he's always been hyper efficient. And then last year after the injury, it fell apart for him. Now, a year removed, is he much better? He could be. And I actually do have a good landing spot for him. And I think it would be he takes over Aaron Jones's job and goes with the Vikings with Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah, this is going to be a game of musical chairs. I mean, it might be the same case with the quarterbacks too. Just pay attention to where things are spinning, because a lot of these guys will end up replacing others that go somewhere. So just watch it to see kind of a good exercise to do for fantasy is like assess each backfield to say, okay, where are the touches going to go? Is this a workhorse back? What is the potential of this situation? So that's what you need to kind of do as a little loose experiment. But there's a lot of places he can end up. He's been long rumored to go to Dallas to be the power back. We talked about the Bears and Steelers needing somebody. The Broncos could do kind of a combo, right? I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos go out and say, we're going to get a couple of these guys, right? And say Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones or something like that for cheap, and they make it happen. Because we've seen it work before with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Maybe Chubb and Hunt go together somewhere, and someone tries to recreate what Cleveland had with the offensive line and the blocking there. So definitely, I think he can't be alone anymore. He can't be a guy that's going to have his biggest workload. He did work very well when Hunt was there with him in Cleveland. I think that was a good combination, although he couldn't stay on the field quite a bit. So that's my concern. He's getting a little bit older, durability concerns. I don't know how much he's going to be able to actually stay on the field to contribute, but he'll have a number of suitors. I just think it's going to be in a more limited role. I don't see him being a lead in any situation, but about maybe a 50-50 touch guy or at best a 60-40 touch guy.
Yeah, I could see him getting 60% of a backfield still. And
Yeah.
I can't envision the Vikings using an early draft pick on a running back. So I do think they add one of these older veterans in free agency. They also do seem to love Cam Akers. He's a free agent too, so I'm sure they sign him, but that's not going to be their lead back. So I could see them maybe going Nick Chubb and then Cam Akers. Maybe they split the backfield a bit. Now with Kareem Hunt, who I mentioned, he turns 30 in August. I guess I didn't realize that he was that old. I say that old, even though he's 3 years younger than I am, but he was a running back 25 in fantasy points per game this past year. And, with the Chiefs, he's been a really good running back in this time. The Browns, he just didn't get enough workload to be a consistent fantasy asset. But last year when he got the work, I still think he proved that he could still, be a lead back in this league. The efficiency wasn't elite. It wasn't great. And he actually hasn't been very efficient over the last 3 years, averaging just 3.5 yards per carry. But again, I do think a team will be looking for him to be kind of a guy in a backfield that he splits a backfield, right? So maybe we know Pete Carroll loves to use his running backs, loves to run a ton. So maybe they bring him in to kind of split the workload with another back.
Yeah, what makes me laugh is basically the entire AFC West needs a running back in some form, and they're all going to be battling for some of the same guys, which was also fun to watch. But Kareem Hunt was as solid as he could be. They had some blocking issues. They had to reshuffle a little bit. Joe Thuney had to go left tackle. Now he's gone. Trey Smith they should keep. They have Creed Humphrey, so they need to do some things to help with blocking, and that hurt Hunt a little bit, and really Isaiah Pacheco. And Pacheco was injured, so that also boosted Hunt's value. But when you look at it, I don't know if he's going to love the teams that he ends up with. I've heard some things about the Titans. They, of course, do have the former Chiefs assistant GM as their GM. It may seem odd for people, but just adding a veteran there to kind of help Tony Pollard. Tajay Spears is such a small dude, and he's very limited in what he can do. So maybe more of an interchangeable back in that offense with Tony Pollard, that would be Kareem Hunt's role. Then you look at the Texans. He could also be in there to kind of offset with Joe Mixon and all that. So there are kind of lesser teams that would be interested. Now, there's definitely a divide, right? You have the Broncos, Steelers, Chargers, Bears, Chiefs. These are the contenders. Then you get into like the teams that are not really. And the Raiders, I guess you put the Cowboys somewhere in that ambiguous state. And then you get deeper these backup roles. And then the other place you could look at is the Colts. I mean, I think they're in the market as well for a versatile backup to Jonathan Taylor that they can trust a little bit more. So Kareem Hunt, I'm not sure is going to land a role more so than a handcuff going forward. Again, if he couldn't really produce as a lead back the way the Chiefs wanted, I don't know if you're going to get that anywhere else here, especially as he's older and has had some injury attrition.
Now, one guy who's still super young, Javonte Williams, 24 years old still.
Yeah.
He will be 25 in April, but still super young, 35, number 35 overall pick in the 2021 draft. So early second round. It just hasn't come together for him, right? Like he had to split the backfield with Melvin Gordon in 2021 as a rookie. Then when we finally thought he was going to take over, he tears his ACL, and he has not looked the same since tearing his ACL. And it's been 2 years removed now, and it just doesn't seem to be getting any better. His average rushing yards per game have declined each year in his NFL career. And like he had every opportunity, right, that you could want with the Broncos. They're really they were desperate for just a running back to take over, to take control of that lead role and be good. And he couldn't do it. So I don't know if there's a team that would be a better fit for him or that he could be better on another team. But it is hard to say that no team will take a shot on him just because of how young he is and where he was drafted and the hype that there was surrounding him coming out of college.
Yeah, I think someone will stash him and they'll look at their situations, and he's going to be rather cheap, I would say, to add to a roster. So you could even look at him as a third back, right? Have a little bit of a competition and see where you can end up in these groupings. Now, he just had a few flashes for Sean Payton, wasn't really established in previous offenses. He doesn't really have a good connection there. Maybe he can go to like Green Bay, right? And maybe help with Josh Jacobs if A.J. Dillon goes away. So there's some options here that you're looking at that are more backup types here for Javonte Williams. It's more of a flyer, right? Let's see what he can do and go from there. I don't know if he's just going to be handed a job because again, the knee injuries were a factor when you're battling with Audric Estime, and at the end it's Tyler Bidier is the guy competing for touches. You haven't had a very good year. So he's flashed. He's very talented, but I think a team's going to have to basically take a flyer at him and hope for the best.
Now, A.J. Dillon, I feel like, before last year, there is some hype surrounding him that maybe he could leave Green Bay, get a starting job somewhere. But then he comes back to Green Bay, right? And we thought, oh no, he might eat into Josh Jacobs' role. But it turns out he missed the entire season because he suffered a neck stinger in the preseason in practice and then missed the entire season. Now, prior to 2024, he had at least 200 touches and at least 800 scrimmage yards in 3 straight seasons. So each season from 2021, 2022, and 2023, he was not productive, right? Even when he did get the workload in games, he's had 20 career games with at least 15 touches. In those games, he averaged just 11.7 fantasy points per game in those games. When you're comparing him against all other running backs in games with at least 15 touches since 2021, since he entered the league, his 11.7 are the fewest points per game in those such games among running backs. So it has not been pretty for him. But I do think a team will be desperate enough, like the Raiders, if they, end up not being able to get someone in the draft because they have other needs to fill. I could see, Pete Carroll being like, we need a big bruiser, right, that can handle this workload. And I could see the Raiders stinking again at the running game because they give the job to A.J. Dillon where he gets a bunch of touches, but he's not productive.
Yeah, I wonder if there's any real market for him outside of Green Bay. Remember, he looked around and then he had to gun back on a 1-year deal. Then he hurt his neck. So I don't know if he has a lot of value. He's very limited in his skill set, right? He's always been a power back, and he's productive if you have an offensive line and go there. So maybe it's more of a straight up backup role for A.J. Dillon. Maybe San Francisco looks at him a little bit with their injuries that they've had there and just say, look, he's a guy that we can plug in. He's been in a similar type of offense that at least he's going to come through with the power situation. So I think it's what you see is what you get with Dillon. He's going to give you almost nothing in the passing game. He's going to help you on those early downs. And it seems like that's the way the 49ers kind of like their backup. So I could see definitely a number 2 situation develop for him. So again, don't be surprised. I mean, it's always a bit questionable how these guys end up, like a Tony Pollard. He ended up with Tyjae Spears there in Tennessee, and it wasn't all that great, right? It was okay for fantasy at times, but it wasn't inspiring, and you didn't really get excited to play him except in a handful of good matchups. So I think we're talking about a lot of backup material here with Chubb, Williams, Hunt, and Dillon.
We are, but there's so many teams that need to fill this position that the guys are going to end up with roles and be, relevant for fantasy next year. That is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to us on a podcast app, leave us a review. Leave us a 5-star review if you're so kind as well. And we will talk to you tomorrow. Have a good night. Bye, y'all.